Hey guys, it's Egwin here from Beyond Systems. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about our legs, our feet and our hips. And I'm gonna present a really easy exercise. We're gonna use a bow stance posture and do some weight shifts, some rotational stuff for the hips in order to improve movement efficiency. Now, what is it that I'm talking about when I talk about movement efficiency? Point being, the better coordinated different muscle groups around joints are, the better the joint can work in the way it's originally built. Now, our muscles allow us to move joints in various different ways. The real tricky thing is, how do we coordinate the muscles in such a way that they most perfectly allow the joint geometry to actually support movement without additional pressure that doesn't have to be there necessarily, and so on and so on. The effects of this posture, of this movement, well, you can use that as a warm-up exercise. You can also use this exercise in the idea of creating more movement efficiency for whatever you do, whether it's strength training later on or it's just regular movement. It doesn't matter. It's just a coordinational thing that really helps you to balance out muscle groups and to get more mobility in your lower body. It will also help you with grounding, but we're gonna talk about that in a separate video. So this is how this posture looks like. Let me just adjust the camera here for a second so you can see a bit better what's happening in my leg. We're gonna start in a bow stance. Now, a bow stance basically is, we have one leg in front, we have one leg in the rear. The front leg points straight to what I call the front right now. If I do this bow stance right to the camera, now my front leg is pointing towards you. The rear leg is slightly shifted to the side, so I'm not standing with both heels on one line towards the camera. There is a width in this stance, so basically two lines that I'm standing on, and the rear leg is slightly turned to the outside, roughly at a 45-degree angle. I say roughly at a 45-degree angle because it's really all about how your joints and how your body structure feels healthy and feels well aligned. Now, for some people this might be 25 degrees, for some people it might be 50 or 55 degrees. That's why I say roughly 45-degree angle. Just make sure that your feet are not both pointing towards the camera, so 90-90, and make sure that the rear leg isn't turned out completely so that we have a degree of 90 between the front and the rear leg. So that's what we want to avoid. Why? Because with a translatory movement, when the rear leg is turned out 90 degrees and we move to the front and we turn the hip, now we put a lot of pressure on the inside edge of the knee, which is exactly what we try to avoid here. We don't want to put any additional pressure on the joints. We just want to use them in a healthy and proper manner. Now, getting into this position here, there is one more thing we want to do, and this is just simply drop a little bit into your legs. It's almost as if you were trying to sit on something, on a very high chair or something like that. So you allow both knees to float out to the side, you let your pelvis drop in between your legs, and most importantly, both knees are aligned with the toes of the foot that's with that leg. So the left knee actually points in the same direction than the left toes, right knee points in the same direction than right toes. So that's basic structure that we are using here. Out of this position, try to maintain as much as possible an upright body. But when I say maintain an upright body, I don't mean like really military, like really with a lot of tension or something like that. Just try to keep an upright body with as little effort as possible. the second you feel like, ooh, okay, I can't really keep my body upright, or it really pushes me into a hollow back or anything like that, then the movement is already too big for your current level of mobility. So we really want to move within a very comfortable range of motion. So when I'm in this posture, my spine is pretty much upright. I have obviously slight curves in there. And right now I'm standing with my weight evenly distributed between the front and the rear leg. From this posture, what I want you to do is just a simple and small weight shift towards the front leg, and a small and tiny weight shift back into the rear. So it's nothing really fancy, it's just within a very, very comfortable range of motion like I've just mentioned. And it's really this moving between the front and the rear leg. Here already we have very interesting mechanics in the rear leg. My hip, my knee and my ankle in the rear leg, they really have to work with each other in order to be able to fold the leg in such a way that this movement is actually healthy. Now when I turn in such a way that now my rear leg is pointing directly to the camera, I want you to notice what my knee is doing here. I shift my weight to my front leg, which is the right one. Now when I shift my weight back into the left leg, notice my thigh, my knee, and the direction my toes are pointing is the same. When I move back here and something like this happens, I get an angle into the knee towards the inside, or something like this happens, so that my knee is actually pushing out to the side. Both are things that we try to avoid right now. What we want is really this 100% aligned shift between the front and the rear. Obviously, we are working with mobility here already. We're working on abduction and adduction in the rear hip joint. We're working on flexion and extension in the hip, in the knee, in the ankle. We're working on inversion and eversion in the ankle joint down there. So we are working with almost all different aspects that we can use our joints in. The front leg obviously has it much easier in this posture to actually move, because there isn't a lot of things happening. Now one more important thing is the position of the pelvis. Obviously right now my pelvis is still slightly turned to the side, so I'm not 100% locked to the front. My pelvis is slightly turned to the side, so pretty much in between my front and rear leg, and I'm simply moving between the front and the rear. Some of you might have heard me say that before. When we do this, you can choose from a couple of different options actually of how to shift your weight. One option would be to push from the front foot to the rear and to push from the rear foot to the front. This is one option. The other option is actually to pull from the rear leg and to pull from the front leg. When we pull, the focus is always on the middle joint of the extremity. So when we are with our weight more centered over the front foot and we want to move towards the rear, now it's as if a string was attached to my rear knee, pulling out in the direction of my left toes, whoop, and that almost sucks me back. Pulling and pushing creates a completely different biomechanical chain in the body. It uses a completely different set of muscles, and most of the time it's the way of moving where you are more aligned in terms of your joints. When you take a look at this posture again from here, when I push from my front foot to the rear, now my rear foot at the beginning isn't quite sure neurologically and muscular wise what's gonna happen. It's not quite sure, do we have to take 100% of the weight, is it just a little bit? So what happens is, if I push into the rear leg, the first reaction of the rear leg is a slight tensing up instead of a release. Now whenever we push into a structure and the first thing that happens is a tensing up, but I keep pushing into that structure, I lose a little bit of alignment in terms of timing and position of my joints. That's really important. Rhythmicality, timing, position of joints and tension level in the musculature, all of those things, they work together when we talk efficiency of movement. Efficiency of movement defined as using as little power as necessary to actually perform a certain movement, and to do it in a in the most aligned physiological way possible, plus reducing the tension and pressure in the joint and the musculature as much as possible. Now you might say, yeah, well, but my intent is actually muscle training. All right, no problem with that. Do your muscle training, do your, I don't know, squats, deadlifts, whatever you want to do, no problem there, but still the alignment of the joints will be better if you use principles that I am sharing with you here. If the alignment of the joint is better, that means that your muscles can work more effectively. That doesn't mean that you can't use higher weights to actually train the muscles. It just means that it gets safer and more effective. All right, let's just come back into this movement here once more for a quick session. One thing that we can do to improve hip mobility and to bring hip mobility into this game is actually to shift the weight, to turn our body from the left to the right and back again. So from here, right now I'm actively closing my front hip joint a tiny little bit. Now, watch my pelvis. My pelvis is now pointing out to the side. When I point my pelvis more towards the front leg, what has to happen is that my front hip joint has to close a little bit. Closing in front means opening in the rear, so now we also have a slight, really slight opening and stretching effect back here in my iliosacral joint and in my rear hip area of the right leg. From this posture, turn to the front. When I move my weight to the rear, now I can simply allow the pelvis to drop to the side as well, just with the movement. Now, this is possible again with both activations, with the activation of pushing back as well as with the activation of pulling back by allowing the knee to move out to the side. Try both versions. They will feel completely different, but both are of benefit in terms of coordination and in terms of learning about your body. And after all of those videos that I'm doing, most of them, they're really designed to help you to tune into, to consciously and actively tune into your body in such a way that you actually start to regain trust in your sensomotoric feedback, which eventually allows you to know which movements suit you and which ones don't. To know before you hurt yourself, oh, I should be careful with this movement, or oh yeah, today I'm really well aligned, I can do a couple of weights more or something like that, or in sports and so on and so on. So this is a very important aspect here. Let me show you this movement just once again from this posture. When I turn my hip a little bit more to the front, make sure not to shift your weight too far to the front, as this will push you into a hollow back in the lumbar spine. Just close your hip to the front, then allow your rear knee to go to the side and slightly pull back. Turn your hip to the side. Now pull your front knee to the front, and bring your hip back to the front. Pull your rear knee to the side and rotate the hip to the side. Front knee to the front, turn, rear knee to the rear, and turn to the side again. Once again, in this posture, it's important that when we move the pelvis, the knees stay in the same structure that we started out with. Now, my front foot, now the left, I just changed my legs. My front foot, my front knee should be aligned with each other towards the camera right now. My rear foot is turned out in a 45-degree angle. And my pelvis right now is pointing towards the camera as well. But if I move backwards and I turn my pelvis, make sure that still my front knee is pointing the exact same direction that my front toes are pointing, and my rear knee as well. So I'm simply moving my weight between the front and rear without doing anything like this. Now I lock my hip joints. I don't do anything in my hip joints if I do this. There is no abduction or adduction in my hip joints, no opening or closing in my hip joints. So I really want to move my hip joints between my legs, and I want a rotational aspect in my hip joints. Alright, so that's enough for today, I'd say. If you have questions, leave them in the comment box below. I know I've been talking about this and similar principles before, but I find it quite interesting and quite important to talk about them over and over again, and also to show them from different perspectives using different words, because they can really help you to build a solid foundation, most literally, physically and also sensomotorically for movement, and also psychologically, but we'll talk about that, as mentioned before, in a separate video someday. Alright, have a wonderful time. If you liked the video, please click like, share and subscribe, and stay tuned for further updates on this and many more things regarding body posture, movement, the connection between movement, consciousness, psychology, and so on and so on. Have a wonderful time. Thanks for watching. Bye.